My name is Ellie Turner. I'm a woman who believes in systems, in order, in the elegant architecture of both technology and life. At 42, I've spent my career building digital fortresses that protect billions in assets, the kind of infrastructure most people never see but rely on every single day. Until yesterday, I was the lead systems engineer at Snyder Enterprises, a company whose supply chain systems I personally architected from the ground up. That was before they decided my 15 years of loyal service was worth less than the CEO's 24-year-old niece with an Instagram following. The morning it happened started like any other. I arrived at the Riverside City headquarters at precisely 7:42 a.m., the same time I'd arrived for the past decade. The security guard, Marcus, nodded at me with his usual half-smile. I swiped my badge, the familiar beep confirming my identity, and made my way to the elevator. The hushed atmosphere should have been my first clue. The usual morning chatter was conspicuously absent, heads turned as I walked by, then quickly looked away. In the elevator, two junior engineers who normally peppered me with questions about system configurations suddenly found the floor indicators fascinating. When I reached my office on the 17th floor, I set down my leather messenger bag and ceramic travel mug, a gift from my team last Christmas, with Code Queen emblazoned on it in pixelated font. I had just logged into my workstation when I noticed something strange: access denied to the primary development environment. I tried again. Same result. Peculiar. As lead systems engineer, I had the highest clearance level in the entire technical division. I tried a different approach, running a diagnostic through a back channel I'd established years ago. Still nothing. Ellie. A hesitant voice from my doorway. Nate Summers, the IT director and a man I'd considered a friend for over a decade, stood there looking like he was about to tell me my dog had died. James wants to see you in the conference room. James Ellison, CEO. A man who typically communicated with me through his army of assistants, except during board presentations when he needed someone to explain why his company was worth almost $1 billion. What's going on, Nate? I kept my voice steady, professional. Inside, warning lights were flashing. Just head to the innovation conference room. Please. Nate couldn't meet my eyes, and in that moment, I knew. As I walked past the open office area, I spotted her, young, confident, dressed in what I can only describe as business casual influencer designer blazer over a graphic tee, with immaculate makeup that had probably taken an hour to look natural. She was holding court with a group of junior engineers, gesturing enthusiastically while they nodded along. Wrapped. Zoe Parker. I recognized her from the company newsletter feature last month. CEO's niece brings fresh perspective as new VP of Digital Transformation, a position that hadn't existed until she needed a job. The innovation conference room, named with typical corporate lack of imagination, was already filled when I arrived. James sat at the head of the table, scrolling through his phone. HR Director Melissa Chen sat to his right, a folder placed precisely in front of her. Legal Counsel David Walsh to his left, looking appropriately somber. And Nate, who had somehow materialized in the room before me, sitting with slumped shoulders near the end of the table. Ah, Ellie, please, have a seat. James barely glanced up from his phone. I remained standing. I'd prefer to know why I've been locked out of my systems first. That got his attention. He set his phone down and gave me what I'm sure he thought was a compassionate look. Ellie, you've been an incredible asset to this company for many years. Past tense, always a bad sign. But the world is changing rapidly. Our board has made it clear that we need to evolve, embrace new methodologies, new perspectives. He gestured vaguely toward the glass wall, beyond which I could see Zoe now sitting at my assistant's desk, typing something on her rose gold laptop. We're restructuring the Infrastructure and Innovation Division. Your position is being realigned. You mean eliminated? I said flatly. Transformed, he countered with a corporate smile that didn't reach his eyes. Zoe has some brilliant ideas about taking our AI-driven supply chain systems in new directions. More agile, more social integrated, more relevant to today's market. I looked at Nate, who was studying the wood grain of the conference table as if it held the secrets of the universe. "And you signed off on this?" I asked him. "It was a board decision, Ellie," Nate mumbled. "The restructuring affects multiple departments." "Let's be honest here," I said, turning back to James. "You're firing me to make room for your niece." "That's not," Melissa from HR began, but I cut her off. "The niece who thinks the cloud is just a place where her vacation photos live. The niece who, during her only interaction with my team, suggested we just use Wix to rebuild our proprietary logistics platform." James's face hardened. "I understand you're upset, Ellie, but this transition doesn't have to be unpleasant. We've prepared a generous severance package." He nodded to Melissa, who slid the folder across the table. 6 months' salary, extended benefits, and a glowing recommendation. In exchange for signing an NDA and non-compete, I assume I didn't touch the folder. "Standard procedure," David the lawyer interjected smoothly. I looked around the room, at these people I'd worked alongside for years. James, who couldn't write a line of code if his life depended on it, but who took credit for the technological marvel that was our supply chain system. Nate, who had once been passionate about innovation but had slowly transformed into another corporate yes man. Melissa from HR, who had recruited me all those years ago with promises of building something revolutionary. "When do I clean out my office?" I asked, my voice calm and controlled. "Today would be best," James said, already reaching for his phone again. "Security will assist you." Security. I raised an eyebrow. Am I suddenly a threat after 15 years of loyal service? "Just protocol," Melissa said quickly. "Considering your level of system access." I almost laughed. If they only knew. "I'll need time to properly document my work and brief whoever is taking over my projects." I said. "That won't be necessary," James replied, not looking up. "Zoe has already been onboarding for the past 2 weeks, and we have your documentation on file." 2 weeks? They'd been planning this for at least 2 weeks, all while I'd been working 60-hour weeks to complete the latest system upgrade. And my documentation, the official documentation, was a carefully crafted facade that revealed only what I wanted others to see. The real architecture, the intricate fail-safes, the hidden protocols. Those existed only in my mind and in encrypted files that even the most talented hackers would struggle to decipher. "I see," was all I said. "Then I guess there's nothing left to discuss." I turned and walked out without taking the severance folder. I could hear Melissa calling after me about necessary paperwork, but I didn't stop. As I passed through the open office area, conversations hushed. My former team looked at me with a mixture of confusion and pity. I kept my head high, my face a mask of professional indifference. Back in my office, a security guard was already waiting, an empty box in his hands. Not Marcus from the lobby, who knew me, but someone new. Someone who would see me as just another disgruntled ex-employee to escort from the building. "You have 30 minutes, ma'am," he said, his voice carefully neutral. I nodded and began the process of dismantling 15 years of my professional life. Photos of my team at company retreats. Awards for system innovation. The small cactus that had somehow survived years of neglect. Into the box they went. These physical remnants of a career now ended. What wouldn't fit in the box were the countless hours I'd poured into building Snyder's technological backbone, the sleepless nights solving critical system failures, the elegant code architecture that had made me a legend in certain technical circles, the backdoors and fail-safes I'd built into the system that no one, not even Nate, knew about. As I packed, my mind was already racing, calculating. They thought they were simply replacing an aging employee with a younger model. They had no idea what they had actually done. 28 minutes later, I closed the box and took one last look around my now barren office. Through the glass walls, I could see Zoe already moving in, directing facilities staff where to place her things, taking smiling selfies in front of her new desk. The security guard cleared his throat. "Time to go, ma'am." I picked up my box and walked out. past colleagues who suddenly found their monitors endlessly fascinating, past Zoe, who gave me a smile that was probably meant to be sympathetic but came across as smug, past the executive offices where James was already in another meeting, gesturing emphatically about the bright future ahead. In the elevator down, I reached into my pocket and pulled out a small device that looked like an ordinary USB drive. It wasn't. It was something I had created years ago, a safeguard against exactly this type of situation. I had called it Pandora, an innocuous name for something with extraordinary power. When the elevator doors opened on the ground floor, I walked steadily through the lobby, past Marcus, who looked genuinely confused and upset to see me leaving with a box, and out into the bright riverside morning. Only when I was in my car, box secured in the passenger seat, did I allow myself a moment of emotion. Not grief or anger as most would expect, but something colder, more calculated. They had made a critical error, and now they would learn the consequences. I started the car and drove away from Snyder Enterprises for what I thought would be the last time. Little did I know that within 24 hours, I would bring their entire empire crashing down with just 6 seconds of code. The drive to my apartment took exactly 22 minutes, the same as it had for the past 7 years. Habit and routine had always been my anchors, bringing order to a chaotic world. Now those anchors had been cut loose, and I was adrift in uncharted waters. My apartment was a minimalist haven on the 14th floor of a renovated industrial building. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of Riverside City, the river that gave the city its name, snaking through the urban landscape like a silver ribbon. It was a view I rarely had time to appreciate during daylight hours. I set the box down on my kitchen island and methodically unpacked it. The Code Queen mug went beside the coffee maker. The small cactus found a home on the windowsill. The framed awards and certificates I placed in a drawer, relics of a past life. Then I sat down at my home workstation. A custom-built system with processing power that would make most tech enthusiasts weep with envy. I had 3 monitors, each displaying different aspects of my digital life. I pushed aside the personal projects that had occupied what little free time I had and opened a secure connection. For the next several hours, I worked meticulously, tracing digital breadcrumbs, following electronic trails that I had laid years ago. Most companies don't realize that their most valuable assets aren't their physical properties or even their intellectual property, it's their data infrastructure, the invisible framework upon which everything else rests. And I had built Snyder's framework. When I first joined the company, their systems were a patchwork of outdated technology and stopgap solutions. I had transformed that chaos into an elegant, efficient machine. But I wasn't naive. I had seen too many brilliant minds discarded when they became inconvenient. Too many loyal employees shown the door when nepotism or politics intervened. So I had built myself an insurance policy, not out of malice, but out of practicality. A ghost system, a perfect mirror of Snyder's infrastructure that existed outside their network, accessible only to me. Every critical algorithm, every client database, every proprietary piece of code, all of it backed up and updated in real time through an invisible connection that even the most thorough security audit would never detect. It wasn't illegal, not technically. I had written the original code, designed the architecture. I had simply created a backup that belonged to me, not the company. A backup that, until today, I had never intended to use. As evening fell and the city lights began to twinkle beyond my windows, I discovered something that made my blood run cold. Zoe Parker, in her infinite wisdom, had already begun making changes to the system. Critical changes to core protocols that had taken me years to perfect. I pulled up the code she had modified and stared in disbelief. She had removed essential security protocols, bypassed crucial verification steps, all in the name of making the system more streamlined and user-friendly. What she had actually done was create a ticking time bomb. The AI-driven supply chain system that I had built wasn't just some corporate software. It managed the logistics for pharmaceutical deliveries to hospitals across the country. It coordinated emergency supply transport during natural disasters. It ensured that critical infrastructure components reached their destinations exactly when needed. And now, thanks to Zoe's amateur tinkering, it was compromised, not just slightly buggy, but fundamentally broken in ways that would only become apparent when it was too late. I leaned back in my chair. Considering my options, I could warn them. A simple anonymous email to the right people might be enough to make them check the system. Discover the flaws before they caused real damage. The ethical engineer in me, the professional who had dedicated her career to building reliable systems, urged me to do just that. But another part of me, the part that had been dismissed like an obsolete piece of equipment, that had watched as my life's work was handed over to an unqualified socialite with family connections. That part wanted to let them discover their mistake the hard way. The decision was made for me when my phone pinged with a notification. A news alert from the tech industry feed I subscribed to. Snyder Enterprises announces revolutionary update to supply chain system. Stock surges 12%. I opened the article, and there she was, Zoe Parker, identified as VP of Innovation and Systems, smiling for the camera in what appeared to be my former office. The quote beneath her photo made my jaw clench. We're moving away from outdated methodologies and embracing a more intuitive, social integrated approach to supply chain management. The previous system was built on legacy thinking. We're breaking down those barriers and reimagining what's possible. Legacy thinking, my 15 years of expertise, my carefully crafted system architecture, dismissed as outdated by someone who had probably never written a line of production code in her life. I closed the article and turned to my center monitor. The ghost system was still there. A perfect copy of Snyder's infrastructure before Zoe had begun her improvements. I could save them. I could provide them with a backup when their system inevitably failed. Or I could do something else entirely. I opened a secure terminal and began typing. The code flowed from my fingers like water. Elegant and purposeful. I wasn't creating a virus or malware, nothing so crude. Instead, I was crafting what I called a cascade lock, a sequence that would identify all the vulnerabilities Zoe had introduced and systematically exploit them, triggering a complete system shutdown. It wasn't destruction, it was revelation. The digital equivalent of pulling back a curtain to expose the shoddy workmanship behind it. By midnight, the cascade lock was complete. I sat back, finger hovering over the enter key. Once executed, there would be no going back. Snyder's entire digital infrastructure would collapse like a house of cards, and with it, potentially, the company itself. Was I really prepared to do this? To potentially destroy a company that employed thousands, that provided vital services to countless organizations? I thought of James's dismissive attitude, of Nate's betrayal, of Zoe's smug confidence. I thought of 15 years reduced to a box of trinkets and a severance package. I thought of the system I had lovingly built, now being dismantled by hands that didn't understand its intricate design. And then I remembered something else, my ghost system. I had a complete, functioning backup of everything. The company wouldn't be destroyed, it would be exposed, and when they were at their most vulnerable, someone would step in with a solution. That someone just wouldn't be me. I opened another secure connection, this one to Phoenix Tech, Snyder's main competitor. 6 months ago, they had tried to recruit me, offering a substantial salary increase and creative control over their technology division. I had declined out of loyalty to Snyder. That loyalty now seemed laughably misplaced. I composed a careful email to Diane Zhang, Phoenix's CTO. No mention of what I was about to do. Nothing that could be traced back to me later. Just a request for a meeting tomorrow afternoon to discuss mutual opportunities. Diane's response came within minutes, so despite the late hour, a meeting was set for 3 p.m. the following day. Everything was in place. I looked at the time, 12:41 a.m. In a few hours, the early shift would arrive at Snyder. Developers and engineers starting their day, unaware that it would be unlike any other. I set an alarm for 7 a.m., closed my laptop, and went to bed. Sleep came surprisingly easily, perhaps because for the first time in years, I was fully in control of what happened next. Morning arrived with harsh sunlight streaming through my windows. I had forgotten to close the blinds, a break in my usual routine. But then, nothing about this day would follow routine. I made coffee in my Code Queen mug, a small act of defiance against the world that had tried to dethrone me. As I sipped the strong black brew, I opened my laptop and checked the Snyder systems through my ghost connection. As expected, everything appeared normal. The early shift had logged in. Systems were running smoothly, the daily operations proceeding without a hitch. No one had yet discovered the critical flaws in Zoe's modifications. I showered and dressed with particular care, selecting a charcoal gray suit that I reserved for important presentations. Today would be a presentation of sorts, though my audience wouldn't know it until it was too late. At precisely 2:03 p.m., I opened my laptop again and connected to the Ghost system. The workday at Snyder was in full swing. Hundreds of employees going about their tasks, all dependent on the digital infrastructure I had built. I took a deep breath and executed the cascade lock. The code ran perfectly, just as I had designed it. On my screen, I could see it working through the system, identifying the vulnerabilities Zoe had introduced, exploiting them one by one in a carefully orchestrated sequence. At 2:09 p.m., exactly 6 seconds after I initiated the cascade, the entire Snyder digital infrastructure went dark. Every server, every workstation, every connected device within the company simultaneously lost connection. The supply chain management system, the accounting software, the customer databases, the email servers, all of it gone in an instant. Through my Ghost system, I could see the chaos unfolding. Error messages flooding the screens of IT personnel. Emergency protocols failing to initiate because those, too, had been compromised. Frantic calls to technical support that couldn't be answered because the phone systems were integrated with the now-failed network. In 6 seconds, I had effectively erased a $920 million company's digital presence. I closed my laptop, straightened my jacket, and prepared to leave for my meeting with Diane Zhang. As I picked up my keys, my phone began to ring. Nate's name flashed on the screen. I considered ignoring it, but then decided against it. This was, after all, part of the show. "Hello, Nate," I answered calmly. "Ellie." His voice was panicked, breathless. "Thank God you answered. We have a situation here. The entire system is down. Everything. We can't get anything back online." "That sounds serious," I said, keeping my tone neutral. "It's beyond serious. It's catastrophic. None of the recovery protocols are working. Zoe says she made some updates to streamline the system, but nothing like this should have happened. We need you. Ellie, James has authorized me to offer you a consulting fee, whatever you want. Just please come in and help us fix this." I allowed a moment of silence before responding. "I'm afraid I have a prior commitment this afternoon, Nate. A job interview, actually." "Ellie, please," he begged. "The pharmaceutical delivery tracking is down. There are hospitals waiting for critical supplies. The financial impact alone, the stock has already dropped 15% in the last hour." "That does sound dire," I agreed. "Have you tried restoring from backups?" "The backup systems are corrupted somehow. Nothing is working." "Well," I said, "it sounds like you have quite a challenge ahead of you. I wish you the best of luck with it." "Ellie, wait." I ended the call and slipped the phone into my pocket. As I walked to the elevator, it began ringing again. This time, it was James Ellison himself. I declined the call and switched my phone to silent mode. The drive to Phoenix Tech's headquarters took 35 minutes. Their building was newer than Snyder's, all glass and sustainable materials, a physical manifestation of their forward-thinking approach. As I parked and walked toward the entrance, I couldn't help but appreciate the symmetry of the situation, one door closing, another opening. Diane Zhang was waiting for me in the lobby, elegant in a tailored navy suit, her silver-streaked hair pulled back in a sleek ponytail. She greeted me with a firm handshake and a knowing smile. "Ellie Turner, I've been hoping you'd change your mind about joining us." "Let's just say my circumstances have changed recently," I replied. She nodded, unsurprised. "I heard about the restructuring at Snyder. Their loss, potentially our gain." though I'm hearing rumors of some technical difficulties they're experiencing today. So news had already spread. The tech world was a small one, after all. I wouldn't know, I said with a slight shrug. I was escorted from the building yesterday. Diane's smile widened just a fraction. Well, shall we discuss how you might fit into our organization? She led me to a conference room with a spectacular view of the river. Unlike the sterile, corporate atmosphere of Snyder's meeting spaces, this room felt alive, plants in the corners, comfortable chairs, a digital whiteboard spanning one wall. For the next hour, we talked technology, vision, innovation. Diane didn't just want to hire me, she wanted to create a new division with me at the helm, focused on advanced system architecture and AI integration. The salary she proposed was twice what I had been making at Snyder, with stock options and creative control. There's one more thing, Diane said, sliding a tablet across the table to me. We've been monitoring an unusual situation. It seems that Snyder's entire digital infrastructure collapsed this afternoon. Their stock has plummeted nearly 30%. There are rumors they might not recover. On the tablet was a financial news article with the headline, Snyder Enterprises faces existential crisis after catastrophic system failure. How unfortunate for them, I said, keeping my expression neutral. Indeed, particularly since they just announced a revolutionary update to their supply chain system yesterday. Diane's eyes met mine, sharp and assessing. The interesting thing is, our intelligence suggests there's a complete backup of their system architecture somewhere, a perfect copy that could get them operational again in hours instead of months. I said nothing, waiting for her to continue. Such a backup would be incredibly valuable. To them, of course, but also potentially to us. Not to directly copy that would raise legal issues, but as a reference point, a foundation to build upon. She leaned forward slightly. Do you happen to know anything about such a backup, Ellie? This was the moment of truth. I could deny knowledge, play innocent, and still walk away with an excellent job offer. Or I could show my hand and potentially gain even more. I might, I admitted carefully. Hypothetically speaking, Diane nodded slowly. Hypothetically, if such a backup existed and could be acquired by Phoenix Tech, I could see that being worth a considerable signing bonus. And perhaps a more significant position than what we've discussed. What position did you have in mind? I asked. Chief Technology Officer. Co-equal with me, but focusing on the technical side while I handle the business aspects. CTO of Phoenix Tech. It was more than I had ever aspired to at Snyder, where the glass ceiling had always been firmly in place for anyone without the right family connections. And the signing bonus, $2 million plus 5% equity. Diane named the figure without hesitation, as if we were discussing the weather rather than a life-changing sum. That seems fair, I said, for a hypothetical situation. Diane smiled, understanding the game we were playing. Of course, now, returning to reality. Are you interested in joining Phoenix Tech as our new CTO? I am, I confirmed. When can I start? How about right now? She stood and extended her hand. We have a crisis response team assembled in the strategic planning room. Several of Snyder's biggest clients have reached out to us in panic, looking for alternative suppliers. With your knowledge of their systems, you'd be invaluable in helping us onboard them quickly. And just like that, I transitioned from disgraced former employee to C-suite executive. As Diane led me to the strategic planning room, my phone buzzed in my pocket, more missed calls from Nate, from James, even from the general counsel's office at Snyder. Their desperation was palpable. For the next several hours, I worked with Phoenix's team, carefully guiding them on how to adapt their systems to accommodate Snyder's stranded clients. I shared just enough knowledge to be helpful without revealing my full hand that would come later. When the paperwork was signed and my position secured, by 8 p.m., Phoenix had successfully onboarded 3 of Snyder's largest clients, including a major pharmaceutical distributor whose deliveries had been stalled by the system collapse. The news had already hit the financial wires. Phoenix Tech rescues stranded Snyder clients amid ongoing system failure. When I finally checked my phone again, There were 27 missed calls and dozens of increasingly desperate text messages. The most recent was from James himself. "Ellie, please. The company is on the brink of collapse. Whatever you want, your job back, a promotion, name your price. Just help us recover the systems." I showed the message to Diane, who read it with raised eyebrows. "Are you going to respond?" she asked. I considered it for a moment, then typed a reply. "I'm afraid I've accepted another position. Best of luck with your restructuring." I hit send and put my phone away. "Cold," Diane commented, though her tone suggested approval rather than criticism. "Professional," I corrected, "just as they were with me." She nodded, accepting this. "Your office will be ready tomorrow. For tonight, why don't you go home and rest? It's been an eventful day." It had indeed. As I drove back to my apartment, the city lights reflecting off the river like scattered stars, I felt a sense of completion, of justice served. Not revenge, I didn't think of it that way. Just the natural consequences of poor decisions made by people who should have known better. When I reached my apartment, I poured myself a glass of the expensive whiskey I reserved for special occasions and walked to the window. From here, I could just make out the Snyder Enterprises building in the distance, a dark silhouette against the night sky. Unlike most evenings, when it would be lit up with the activity of late workers, tonight it was largely dark. They had probably sent most people home once it became clear the systems couldn't be quickly restored. My phone buzzed again. A news alert. Snyder Enterprises suspends trading amid system crisis. CEO calls emergency board meeting. I smiled and raised my glass in a silent toast to the view. Tomorrow, I would begin my new life as CTO of Phoenix Tech. I would bring my Ghost system with me, not to copy directly, but as Diane had said, as a foundation to build upon, to create something even better. As for Snyder, they would eventually recover, though not without significant damage to their reputation and market share. James might even keep his job, though Zoe would certainly be looking for new opportunities. Perhaps she could leverage her social media following into an influencer career. The thought made me chuckle as I finished my whiskey. They had fired a name, but they had forgotten the mind behind it. And that mind had just changed the landscape of an entire industry in 6 seconds. Morning dawned clear and bright. A new day in more ways than one. I dressed with particular care a charcoal suit with subtle pinstripes, a silk blouse in Phoenix Tech's signature deep blue, and the platinum watch my father had given me when I earned my master's degree in computer engineering. Professional, polished, powerful. My phone had finally stopped its constant buzzing of notifications from Snyder personnel. Either they had given up on reaching me, or they were too busy dealing with the fallout of yesterday's catastrophe to continue their pleas. Either way, the silence was welcome. As I prepared to leave for my first day as CTO of Phoenix Tech, I took one last look at my home workstation. The Ghost system was still there. A perfect digital twin of what Snyder's infrastructure had been before Zoe's disastrous modifications. With a few keystrokes, I could have restored their systems, saved their company, been hailed as a hero. Instead, I initiated a secure transfer protocol, moving the Ghost system to an encrypted server that only I could access. It would be safe there until I decided exactly how to implement its architecture into Phoenix's infrastructure. The drive to Phoenix Tech felt different this morning. No longer was I headed to a workplace where my contributions were undervalued, where advancement depended more on connections than competence. Today, I was driving toward a future I had shaped through my own actions, decisive and deliberate. Diane met me in the lobby, accompanied by a distinguished-looking man with salt and pepper hair and keen eyes. "Ellie, welcome to your first official day." She greeted me warmly. "This is Harrison Wells, our CEO, Harrison, Ellie Turner, our new CTO." Harrison extended his hand, his grip firm and confident. "Ms. Turner, your reputation precedes you. I've been following your work for years. Your papers on predictive logistics algorithms were revolutionary. I'm thrilled to have you on our executive team." His words carried none of the condescension I'd grown accustomed to from James. This was genuine respect from someone who actually understood the technical complexities of what I had accomplished. Thank you, Mr. Wells. I'm excited for this new chapter. Harrison, please, he insisted. We're colleagues now. Diane has briefed me on your extraordinary qualifications and the circumstances that brought you to us. His eyes twinkled with something like mischief. Timing is everything in business, isn't it? I met his gaze steadily. Indeed it is. Well, your timing couldn't be better for us. Snyder's loss is absolutely our gain. He gestured toward the elevators. Shall we show you to your new domain? The executive floor of Phoenix Tech was nothing like Snyder's stuffy, traditional C-suite. Here, glass walls created an atmosphere of transparency, while thoughtfully placed plants and modern art added warmth and creativity. My office, larger than James's, had been at Snyder, featured a corner view of both the river and the city skyline. We've set up your systems according to the specifications you sent over last night, Diane explained as we entered. Though I imagine you'll want to customize things further. A workstation with 3 high-resolution monitors awaited me, along with a sleek laptop and various peripherals that represented the latest in tech innovation. On the desk was a small welcome package company ID, access cards, and a stunning crystal Phoenix paperweight with my name and title engraved on the base. The team is eager to meet you, Harrison said, but we thought you might appreciate some time to settle in first. The executive meeting is scheduled for 11 a.m., where you'll be formally introduced to the leadership team. Thank you, I said, genuinely touched by their thoughtfulness. This is perfect. After they left, I took a moment to absorb my new reality. Just 48 hours ago, I had been unceremoniously escorted from Snyder Enterprises, my career seemingly in tatters. Now I was the CTO of their largest competitor, with resources and respect that I had never been afforded before. I powered up the workstation and began familiarizing myself with Phoenix's systems. They were impressive, well-designed, logical, secure, but they lacked the elegant integration that had been my hallmark at Snyder. There was room for improvement, for innovation, for my vision. At 10:30 a.m., a gentle knock at my door interrupted my exploration. A young woman with bright eyes and a professional demeanor entered when I called out, Ms. Turner, I'm Layla Patel, your executive assistant. I wanted to introduce myself before the leadership meeting. An executive assistant, another perk of the C-suite that I had never been granted at Snyder, despite managing a team of over 50 engineers. Please, call me Ellie, I said, standing to shake her hand. It's nice to meet you, Layla. Likewise, I've prepared a brief on all the leadership team members for your reference during the meeting. She handed me a tablet with detailed profiles. And I've taken the liberty of organizing your calendar for the next week, though of course it's subject to your approval. I glanced at the calendar meeting strategically spaced to allow for actual work time, lunch blocks protected, no back-to-back marathons that had been the norm at Snyder. Already, this was a different world. This looks excellent. Layla, thank you. She smiled, pleased by the approval. Oh, and you should know there's quite a buzz about your arrival, especially given the timing with Snyder's situation. Oh, I kept my expression neutral. What are people saying? Just that it's an incredible coincidence that their systems collapsed the day after they let you go, Layla said, her tone carefully professional, though her eyes held a hint of admiration. Their stock has dropped 47% since trading resumed this morning. There are rumors of potential bankruptcy if they can't restore their client databases soon. I nodded thoughtfully. The tech world can be unpredictable. Today's giant is tomorrow's cautionary tale. Indeed. Layla checked her watch. We should head to the conference room. The leadership team is gathering. The meeting was a stark contrast to the somber termination discussion I'd endured at Snyder. Here, I was welcomed with genuine enthusiasm, each department head eager to explore collaboration opportunities. Harrison introduced me with pride, highlighting my accomplishments without a hint of the dismissiveness that James had always shown toward technical expertise. As the meeting concluded, Harrison held back while the others filed out. Ellie, there's one more thing we should discuss, he said once we were alone. I've just received word that Snyder's legal team is making noise. They're suggesting that their system collapse might have been deliberately orchestrated. I kept my expression impassive. That sounds like deflection. Companies often look for external culprits when facing internal failures. Harrison nodded slowly. My thoughts exactly. Still, they might come after you, given the timing and your intimate knowledge of their systems. They'd have a difficult case to prove, of course, but it could be unpleasant. I'm not concerned, I said calmly. There's no evidence of any wrongdoing on my part because there was none. Their system failed because of incompetent modifications made after my departure. Good. Harrison seemed satisfied with my response. Nevertheless, I've instructed our legal team to prepare for any potential accusations. Phoenix Tech protects its own. Ellie. Remember that? The implication was clear. They suspected what I had done, but weren't troubled by it. In fact, they were prepared to defend me. It was a level of loyalty I had never experienced at Snyder, where I'd been discarded without a second thought despite years of dedicated service. I appreciate that, Harrison. One more thing, he added, his expression turning serious. That backup system we discussed hypothetically, I'd like to see it implemented here as soon as possible. Not as a copy of Snyder's proprietary technology. Of course, that would be unethical and potentially illegal. But the architecture, the concepts behind it, those belong to the mind that created them. Your mind. I understood what he was asking. Use my knowledge, my expertise, to build something new for Phoenix that incorporated the brilliance of what I had created at Snyder without directly copying it. I'll begin work on it immediately, I promised. Excellent. Harrison stood, preparing to leave. Oh, and you might find this interesting. James Ellison has called an emergency press conference for this afternoon. Rumor has it he's announcing a major restructuring. The news brought a small smile to my lips. Restructuring. What a versatile corporate term. Harrison chuckled. Indeed it is. I look forward to seeing what you create here. Ellie, welcome aboard. After he left, I returned to my new office and settled behind the desk. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, I could see the Snyder building in the distance. Even from here, there seemed to be an air of desperation about it, like a once mighty titan brought to its knees. My phone buzzed with a news alert. Snyder Enterprises announces emergency leadership changes. CEO James Ellison steps down. So it had begun. The first domino to fall in what would likely be a complete overhaul of Snyder's executive team. James was the sacrificial lamb, offered up to appease shareholders and clients alike. I wondered who would replace him, certainly not Zoe, whose inexperience had been so brutally exposed by this crisis. As if on cue, another alert appeared. Zoe Parker, Snyder VP and niece of former CEO, departs company amid system failure fallout. I couldn't help but feel a touch of satisfaction. Not schadenfreude exactly, but a sense that balance had been restored to a universe temporarily thrown into chaos by nepotism and poor judgment. I turned my attention to my new workstation and began outlining the architecture for Phoenix's next-generation supply chain system. It would incorporate all the elegant efficiency of what I had built at Snyder, but with improvements I had never been allowed to implement there: enhanced security protocols, more sophisticated AI integration, and yes, a ghost system backup that only I would control. By the end of my first day at Phoenix Tech, I had drafted the initial framework and shared it with Diane, who was visibly impressed. "This is remarkable," she said, scrolling through my proposals. "You've identified inefficiencies in our current system that our team has been struggling with for months, and your solutions are brilliant." "It's just the beginning," I assured her. "Give me 3 months, and Phoenix will have the most advanced supply chain infrastructure in the industry. Snyder won't just be playing catch-up, they'll be in another league entirely." 3 months? She raised an eyebrow. "Most system overhauls of this magnitude take a year, minimum." "I work efficiently," I said simply, "and I have very few distractions in my personal life." Diane studied me for a moment, then nodded. 3 months it is. You'll have whatever resources you need. As I drove home that evening, the car radio reported on Snyder's continuing crisis. The company had managed to partially restore some systems using outdated backups, but critical client data remained inaccessible. Their stock had stabilized, but at less than half its previous value. The board had appointed an interim CEO, a veteran industry figure known for turnaround situations. Too little, too late. I thought. The damage was done. Snyder might survive, but it would never regain its former position. The clients who had fled to Phoenix would stay, especially once they experienced the superior system I was about to build. At home, I found a package waiting at my door, a gift basket from Phoenix Tech with champagne, gourmet treats, and a handwritten note from Harrison to new beginnings and the brilliant mind behind them. I opened the champagne and poured myself a glass, then walked to the window to gaze out at the city. Somewhere out there, James was probably cleaning out his office, experiencing the same humiliation he had inflicted on me. Zoe was likely updating her social media profiles, removing all mention of her brief, disastrous tenure at Snyder. And Nate. Poor, loyal Nate was undoubtedly working through the night, trying desperately to piece together the system that had collapsed under his watch. I raised my glass in a silent toast, not to their downfall, but to the immutable law of consequences. They had made their choices, and now they were living with the results. Just as I had made mine. My phone buzzed one final time that night, a text message from an unknown number. It was you, wasn't it? The system collapse? I know it was. This is Nate, by the way. Using my personal phone since company devices are still down. I considered ignoring it, but something compelled me to respond. What an interesting theory. Nate. But as I recall, I was escorted from the building and had my access revoked. Perhaps you should look closer at the improvements Zoe made to my carefully designed system. His reply came quickly. We've reviewed her changes. They were superficial, nothing that would cause this kind of catastrophic failure. This was deliberate, Ellie, and brilliant. I have to admit, no one can prove anything. There's no digital trail, no evidence, just the timing. I smiled at his assessment. Of course there was no evidence. I had built the cascade lock to be untraceable, to exploit vulnerabilities in a way that would appear as system corruption rather than sabotage. Sounds like you have a lot of work ahead of you. Nate, good luck with the recovery efforts. We've lost everything. Ellie, client data, proprietary algorithms, years of work. The company might not survive this. I took another sip of champagne before responding. As James said, the world is changing rapidly. Today's giant is tomorrow's cautionary tale. There was a long pause before his final message. For what it's worth, I fought against letting you go. I told James it was a mistake. I'm sorry, Ellie. Sorry. Such a small word for such a profound betrayal. Nate had been my colleague, my friend, for over a decade. And when it mattered most, he had signed the paperwork authorizing my termination without a fight. I didn't respond. Some bridges, once burned, should remain ashes. Instead, I finished my champagne, set the glass aside, and opened my laptop. There was work to be done, a new system to build, a future to create. Phoenix would rise, as its namesake suggested, while Snyder smoldered in the ruins of its own poor decisions. They had fired a name, forgotten the mind, and that mind had just reshaped an industry in 6 seconds. 3 months later, Phoenix Tech unveiled its revolutionary supply chain management system, dubbed Ascendant. The launch event was held at the Grand Riverside Hotel, with industry leaders, tech journalists, and major clients in attendance. I stood on the stage beside Harrison and Diane, no longer the behind-the-scenes architect, but a visible, celebrated innovator. Ascendant represents not just an evolution, but a complete reimagining of logistics technology. I explained to the rapt audience, it integrates AI predictive modeling with human oversight in ways that eliminate traditional bottlenecks while maintaining absolute security and reliability. The demonstration that followed left even the most tech-savvy attendees visibly impressed. Ascendant didn't just track shipments, it anticipated disruptions, rerouted automatically, and maintained perfect transparency throughout the process. And behind it all, invisible to everyone except me, was a ghost system that ensured nothing could ever bring it down. As we concluded the presentation, Harrison announced that Phoenix Tech's stock had jumped 20% since the market opening, breaking all previous records. The company was now valued at $1.7 billion, having effectively absorbed most of Snyder's former market share. Speaking of Snyder, they had survived barely. After months of struggle, they had cobbled together a functional system, though it was a pale shadow of what I had built. They had lost over 70% of their major clients, many now seated in the audience at our launch. Their stock, once trading at $118 per share, had stabilized at around $28. They had a new CEO, a new executive team, and a new, humbler approach to the market. James Ellison had resurfaced at a much smaller firm, several rungs down the corporate ladder from his former position. Zoe Parker, after a brief attempt at rebranding herself as a tech consultant on social media, had disappeared from the industry entirely. And Nate Summers had accepted a position at a mid-level tech company, his reputation tarnished by association with Snyder's collapse. As for me, life had transformed completely. I was now one of the most sought-after experts in the field, with speaking engagements, interview requests, and consulting offers flooding in daily. My salary had tripled, my equity in Phoenix was worth millions, and I had recently purchased a stunning penthouse overlooking the river. But more valuable than the material success was the recognition, the acknowledgement of my expertise, my vision, my worth. No longer was I the overlooked architect working in the shadows while others took credit for my creations. Now I was Ellie Turner, CTO of Phoenix Tech, the woman who had revolutionized supply chain technology. After the launch event, as attendees mingled and celebrated, I stepped outside onto the hotel's riverside terrace for a moment of quiet reflection. The night was clear, stars visible despite the city lights, and the river below gleamed like liquid silver. Quite a triumph, isn't it? I turned to find Diane joining me, 2 glasses of champagne in hand. She offered one to me, which I accepted with a smile. Beyond what I imagined, I admitted. You know, Diane said, leaning against the terrace railing. When I first heard about Snyder's collapse coinciding with your departure, I suspected you might have had a hand in it, but I never asked, never pushed. And why is that? I asked, curious about her perspective. She sipped her champagne thoughtfully before answering. Because sometimes justice isn't served by the system, it has to create its own path. Whatever happened there, the result has been better technology, better service to clients, and better recognition for the true innovators. She raised her glass. To minds that refuse to be forgotten. I clinked my glass against hers. To consequences. We stood in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the city lights reflect off the water. Harrison is talking about expanding internationally. Diane mentioned casually. He thinks Ascendant could revolutionize global logistics, not just domestic. He wants you to lead the initiative. Another opportunity, another chance to build something extraordinary. I'd be interested in exploring that. Good. Diane finished her champagne. We should rejoin the party. People are asking for you, the brilliant mind they want to meet. As we walked back inside, I caught a glimpse of my reflection in the terrace doors, confident, poised, powerful. So different from the woman who had been escorted from Snyder Enterprises with a box of personal belongings just a few months ago. They had fired a name, forgotten the mind. That mind had reshaped an industry in 6 seconds. And now, that mind was just getting started. My name is Ellie Turner. I believe in systems, in order, in the elegant architecture of both technology and life. And I believe that every action has its consequence, every decision its result. Some call it karma, others call it justice. I call it the inevitable outcome of underestimating the wrong person. They thought firing me would erase my legacy. What they didn't know was that the real system never left my hands. It was time for them to face the consequences of underestimating me.